Welcome to our YouTube video series on class action lawsuits. My name is Christopher Neufeld of Neufeld Legal. And in this particular video, we're going to be discussing why you should not opt out of a class action lawsuit. Because in a class action lawsuit with an opt-out system, what is going to happen is, as an individual, you'll receive an opt-out notice. And it'll give you an opportunity at that point in time to opt out of participating as a class member, and instead allowing you to pursue an action, should you so wish, in your individual capacity. And there are a number of reasons why you should seriously consider not opting out, but remaining within the class action. And I'm not going to be talking to it in a self-serving manner, although it could come off as self-serving being a class action lawyer, because these are genuine concerns that any prospective class member needs to properly consider. The least of which is timing. Because when most people receive an opt-out notice, all too often the class action has been going on for many months, if not many years. And because of that, there could be a very substantial issue with respect to the statute of limitations, such that you might be time barred from even bringing properly an individual action. But more importantly is the legal work and monetary aspect that's involved in separating yourself from the main class action. Because these class actions tend to be very large, very complex matters where the defendant corporation is going to push back very hard against all sets of lawyers. And they're going to be very aggressive in their pursuits. As such, from the plaintiff's bar, what we are doing is we're investing hundreds, if not thousands of hours of time into these actions to prosecute them as a representative and as a class level. And what does that mean? It means that the individuals themselves are not taking on the financial burden, but as the lawyers. And then to say that now as an individual, I'm going to separately undertake and pursue this action is very challenging. Least of all, because many of these cases, by their nature, do not involve substantial amounts of money from an individual perspective. And even when they do involve what could be considered a substantial amount of money, cases that we're working on right now, we're talking about potentially $10,000, $50,000, maybe even $100,000 or more per individual class member. Even when you get into that realm, the amount of lawyer time, the amount of expense, and the challenges involved will far offset the recovery that you would get on an individual basis. So you seriously have to consider, is it worth my while to separate myself in the interest of investing my own money on my own lawyers to pursue this action separately? Because even where there is a substantial amount of money at play, it does not mean that you're necessarily going to recover all your investment if you're doing it as an individual action. That is a challenge with these legal lawsuits. Furthermore, if the class action is properly structured, and it's structured in a way that allows for individual aspects to be pursued, because there could potentially be individual areas where there's greater monetary damages accorded to certain members of the class. Well, in fact, the lawsuit should have been structured like what we structure our own lawsuits in the class action field, to allow for those individual challenges where there is specific information that can be brought forth and dealt with the defendant corporation. So you have a forum that you reach at a later stage. And the benefit of that, from not having to have the timing issues we talked about, not having the initial financial outlay for lawyers and work that we've already talked about, but it allows for a very precise, argumentative framework within which one can challenge the defendant corporation and bring forth their own position. Now, naturally, what is advantageous to these individuals who still are within the class is for them to raise these issues with the class counsel, the lawyers who have initiated the class action. To fortify the larger action itself, make it stronger from a legal standpoint with the factual information, the documentation they provide, but also for those lawyers to identify the individual damages early on. Because the lawyers who are fighting for the class members against the defendant corporation are invariably looking for as much advantage as possible. They want to show as much damage as possible. They want to show as much impropriety as possible, illegality, mistakes, issues, and they want to have substantiated facts and documentation. So you're only going to benefit from this. And you can give them and provide your information to them, provide it early on, and they can provide you with a clear understanding of where they see you fitting into the whole process. At the same time, you can always talk to other legal counsel. There's nothing stopping you from talking to other legal counsel. They might well wish to collaborate with class counsel. But it's something that you need to look at. Nobody wants to, from a lawyer's perspective, take on an individual action against a large defendant corporation for the sake of merely recovering thousands of dollars, even tens of thousands of dollars, where the costs are going to be quite substantial, and the likelihood of recovering that money is not as great as one would anticipate. As such, the benefits of the class structure and the class action legislation is such that you need to seriously consider not opting out. Yes, you want to look at your options, but you have to consider the financial impacts, the timing impacts, and the very strong likelihood that if the class action is properly structured, there is a forum within the class action proceedings that allows you to advance individual claims or individual aspects where they properly exist. And if they simply don't exist, there is no need for it. But if there are opportunities within the class action to do it, it should exist. And if there are individual aspects that flow out of the larger proceeding and the individual might be able to pursue them, that is something that you should consider and weigh the benefits and the advantages of doing so. As with anything, it's never a perfect system. But in facilitating justice and facilitating financial recovery, the class action system can be a very effective forum for doing so without forcing people to incur the substantial costs that are necessary to individually go after these large defendant corporations who have a very significant interest in going against every individual and going against the class as a whole. But that is where it comes down to. You need to look at where your advantages lie And in most circumstances, so long as class counsel is proceeding in an appropriate manner, it is advantageous to remain in the class and not opt out, because there are far more advantages as opposed to disadvantages with respect to staying in and not opting out. Thank you.